Okay, then today we will discuss about alternative paradigm. Till now, we have discussed about dominant paradigm and several others related models and theories. As you know that under dominant paradigm, we discussed about modernization theory, then diffusion of innovation theory, then social marketing approach, and then education entertainment approach. Then we discussed about interdependency, then dependency, basic linked model. All these theories we discussed, and basic linked model you can understand that that can also be termed as alternative model of development. But basically, all those things were in a series. Alternative paradigm is a paradigm which came during 1980s. And first, we shall know about what is alternative paradigm. Alternative paradigms approaches call for participatory democracy and locally viable existences with the retrieval of people's knowledge. So it is, exact different from the dominant paradigm. Dominant paradigm always talked about one-way communication. They've never talked about participation. It never talked about feedback. It is a kind of linear kind of development process where idea and innovation will come from Western countries, and local people will accept those ideas and they will be developed. But in alternative paradigm, as you can see that here the approaches changes. And now focus is on participatory democracy, that everyone should participate in developmental initiatives. And ideas should be locally viable, right? And that should be retrieved from people's knowledge. So the kind of thing they said in dominant paradigm, that local knowledge, that local idea, the way their cultural, historical background, all those things were termed as backward. And the paradigm is basically a reaction to all previous development models as it assimilates the various emphasis of the former models. So all the models, everything which has been said in previous development models, it emphasizes on all those things and then finally say that no, participation is must, participation is necessary for bringing development. So development communication scholars began to question the theoretical assumption of the previous models of development. As I told you, the theoretical assumption, what was the theoretical assumption? Theoretical assumption was that idea will come from external source and local population will have to adopt those ideas, those innovations. So they started questioning this theoretical assumption, and the concept of alternate development paradigm rejects the idea of economism and universal significance of the earlier paradigms of development. Earlier paradigms always talks about economic development, growth, and all these kind of things. So this alternative development paradigm rejected the economism, rejected the universal significance which was given to economic growth in earlier paradigms, and the idea of real development must include equity and growth, clean environment, education, health, shelter, employment, balanced relationships within the society and culture. So as it is a kind of extension of basic need model. In basic need model also, a focus was on all these things: education, health, shelter, employment. All these things were there. So alternative paradigm started saying that real development means that not only economic growth but also growth with equity, right? And it is well understood by you people that what is growth with equity. It means the growth should be distributed among people. It should not be concentrated in few hands. Environment should be clean. There must be educational infrastructure, health facilities, home for everybody, employment generation, right? And there must be relationship between society and culture. Because this relationship will create a harmonious kind of development. Otherwise, development we witnessed during dominant paradigm, that was not considered as development, harmonious development. So we need to create a harmony in society also. So there must be a balanced relationship within the society and culture, right? Western culture, we start adopting Western culture, and that culture might not be syncing well with our existing societal norms. So that kind of development will not do good for our society. So that's why now focus was on balanced relationship within the society and the culture. The new alternative paradigm is known by various other names also, like another development, culturalist model, multiplicity of one world. So there are various names, and this one name is of alternative paradigm also it is called. So there are various other names given to this new kind of thought, new kind of developmental approach. How it evaluates evolution of alternative development. It started during 1980s. A number of development scholars were proposing alternative approaches. Some of these scholars supporting the alternative culturalist approaches to development, and these were John Servaes, Hamid Maulana, Goran Hedebro, and Majid Tehranian. These were the people who started talking about alternative development, alternative paradigms. In dominant paradigm, the role of communication was only limited to inform and influence, right? What was the role of communication? The role of communication was to give new information to the people and how to motivate them to adopt those ideas. And in diffusion of innovation theory and modernization theory, everywhere focus was on that how to make them understand that this new idea will bring changes to their lives. And that's why in modernization theory you will find that focus was on promotion of mobile personality. In diffusion of innovation theory, focus was on to influence the psychological state of individual minds and try to make them modern. So the overall focus was to inform and influence. So it was now proposed in this alternative model that communication should be a process of social interaction based on balanced and mutual sharing of information that would lead to real participation, right? So now focus changed. Focus is now not only to inform and influence people to adopt new idea, but focus was on to change to social interaction, how to motivate people to interact. So social interaction based on balanced and mutual sharing, that will lead to real participation. And when people will start participate, then only any developmental initiative can be achieved. So hence the idea of participatory approach emerged as a contrast to the top-down model of development, right? So it is completely different. Earlier top-down approach was adopted, that where the idea will come from top and it will go downwards slowly and slowly. But in participatory approach, it talks about a different approach, that no, interaction should take place from between the society and within the society among various groups, right? And from that social interaction, they will start sharing information and idea mutually, and when they start sharing their ideas, then they will certainly reach to a consensus, and that will lead to real participation, right? So now it is different. The basic hypothesis of this alternative approach is that no single country can function autonomously, and they cannot be self-sufficient completely, right? So the hypothesis is alternative approach of this is that, if we talk about development, if we talk about doing development, sometimes we assume that no, one day will come, then we will be self-sufficient, we will be developed, and we will not be needing any help from other countries. This is what dominant paradigm claim. But the real thing is, the basic hypothesis of this alternative approach, it suggests that no, a single country cannot cannot function autonomously. They cannot be self-sufficient at any time in history, because you have to take help from other countries for some product and for some services. So this was the basic hypothesis, that when it is the case, then it assumed that the external factors cannot determine any national development. So if it is the case that we have to take help from other countries, and we will have this development process will continue from actual participation of the people and from the knowledge of the indigenous people. And then if this is the case, then the claim of dominant paradigm that no external factor can bring development to a country, it is wrong. And according to this theory, development is a process of social change, and very society must be having its own strategy for development. And that's why, if external factor cannot determine the national development, if so the process, what will be process? Process is that social change towards positive goals, social change towards that achieving certain goals. And if this will happen, then you will have to develop your own strategy, because the strategy may changes society to society, community to community. As we discussed earlier about an example where Muslim community started opposing immunization, polio drops, right? And if you want to motivate Muslim population to get their kids polio drops, then you will have to have different strategy of development. So every nation has to develop its own strategy for development. It is not that external factor will determine your development. Right. So one of the most striking and distinctive presumption made by this approach is that there are no particular model of development. And this is the main thing about alternative paradigm, that earlier you will find that one theory came, then another theory came, and all these theories keep coming in and suggesting some new approach for development. But basically, this alternative paradigm suggests that no particular model of development can achieve the goal of development. It means that it should be amalgamation of all the theories. It will be amalgamation of all the models. Something you can get from some model, something you can get from other models. So you use all the models as per your need, and try to get your goal. So this is the first thing. It means that not a single theory or model is enough to bring development. So paradigms tend to build on each other rather than rejecting each other. So it says that paradigms does not mean that one paradigm should reject other. No, paradigms should come together, and it should help each other to build a consensus. So how to go for development, right? So thus a new vision emerged, highlighting on the elements that were neglected by earlier model development. So this is the new thing. So you must be thinking that alternative paradigms are totally different. It talks about amalgamation of all the theories. It talks about participation. It talks about the role of media changed. Now, role of media is not to motivate people. Now, role of media is to motivate people to interact. So motivate people for social interaction. So you must be getting that how things are changing in alternative paradigm. So now basic principles of development as per this dominant paradigm. Hedebro and Servaes listed 6 basic principles of another development. And the development, again, it means alternative development. And these are, what are the basic principles? First one is the paradigm must fulfill the basic requirements of the majority of the population. It means your economic goal should deal with the problems of majority. It should not deal with the problem of minority. It should not deal with microeconomics. It should deal with macroeconomics, the thing we discussed in basic need model, right? It means that if your the problem of majority of your population is hunger, if problem of majority of your population is employment, then shelter, health. Suppose all these are the problems of majority of your population, then your paradigm should focus on the problems of majority, not that how to increase the economic growth and how to increase the per capita income. And this is what Amartya Sen said once. Amartya Sen said that your half of the population is dying with hunger, And what will you do with this 8% or 9% growth rate? This is what he was suggesting. He was talking about another development. He was trying to give alternative paradigms of development, right? It means that I mean, you should be serious about the problems of majority, right? So first principle is this. Second is that it must promote self-reliant and indigenous development, enabling people to define their cultural identities, right? So I mean, development paradigm should promote self-reliant. It should make people to believe that no, they have to be self-reliant, right? And how they will do it through indigenous development, right? It is not from external developmental perspective, but it will come from indigenous development. And that will enable them to define their cultural identities. It means that they must have pride of their cultural identities. They must have pride of their indigenous developmental initiatives, and this way only. This is second, I mean, principles of development. Third is must provide scopes for fulfilling the creative needs of the people, right? So whatever the needs of people, it should provide them. It should fulfill the needs of people, maintain the local ecological balance, right? So I mean, ecology also comes in. It means you have to take care of your nature, you have to take care of your climate. So ecological balance is necessary. Must provide equitable access to world's natural resources. It means resources should be accessible to all. Must emphasize the need for participatory and dialogic communication strategies for development, right? So participatory communication should be there. Dialogical communication based on dialogues between sender and receiver, when the policymakers and for common people. So there must be dialogic communication strategies. So these are six basic principles of development. And if another I mean, explanation of these principles is that two basic criteria of development, that problems must be identified by the people themselves. It means that whatever their problems are, through participatory means, they should identify their problems. And second one is that culture to be the major facilitator force in development process. So see, I mean, now culture is very important. Earlier, I mean, the culture was rejected. So that's why we will find that whatever we are trying to motivate people nowadays through cultural means also. So now cultural things become important. How to use cultural thing to facilitate development process, right? So these are two basic criteria of development. Now, framework of alternate paradigm. Rogers in 1976. Remember, Rogers is the same person who gave the theory of diffusion of innovation theory. And in 1976, he started claiming that this shift of the alternative paradigm, this shift can be identified in the social system itself. And how we can identify this framework? That first one is that decentralization of power, labor-intensive technology, and planning of policies considering the indigenous society and factors in the growth process. So these, during that time, you will be able to identify these things. That this is the time when this decentralization process started. Labor-intensive technology were brought in, right? And planning and policies came to facilitate indigenous society, right? And this was the time, you remember that 73rd and 74th amendments in constitutions was done in India. And what was that? Through 73rd amendment in 1992, basically it happened. It was the time when Panchayati Raj system was being in place. What was this? This was decentralization of power. Then 74th amendments, where, I mean, municipalities were established, right? So all these things were done for what? For decentralization of power. And now you may understand that how through 73rd amendment, through establishment of Panchayati Raj system, how, I mean, we are benefiting from that. Because what it is doing, it is trying to create a participatory kind of model. If you study Panchayati Raj system very closely, you will find that in Panchayati Raj system there is a representative from every tola. In Gaon there are various small units, and that is called. and in every tola they have own representatives, and they have common meetings, and they decide that what should be done in their units. So this is a kind of participatory kind of thing. They identify their problem, what should be done in their village, and through village head they try to achieve that goal. So I mean, these things were brought in place in through alternative paradigms. So it means India was also acting as per the given paradigms at that time. When you must understand that when dominant paradigm was there, India tried to build Doordarshan and All India Radio, this kind of network, to propagate the idea of development. Now, when things changed and it was believed that no alternative paradigm should be in place, where decentralization of power, labor-intensive technology, all these things should be done, then India also adopted that thing, and this is very much clear with 73rd and 74th amendments. As earlier, the focus of development paradigms was only on modernization and industrialization. The shift changed to individual and their improved quality of life with the amalgamation of traditional as well as modern values in this particular paradigm, right? So this is also a change that now it is not talking about modernization, it is talking about amalgamation of traditional and modern values. There are some values, traditional values, which are essential, which are good. We need not to leave those value systems, like family system. Family system in our country is a traditional setup, and this is good. We should not leave this family system, right? So there are certain traditional values which need not to be left behind. So that's why in this paradigm we'll find that they try to amalgamate traditional and modern values. They want us to believe in modern values also, as well as good traditional values also. People were encouraged to participate in the decision-making process, development planning, and its implementation at the indigenous level. So at every process, it is not that only they have to adopt the idea, but at every process, development process, they have to participate, right? Starting from identifying the problem, planning, then implementation. All these things should be done at the indigenous level. Unlike the dominant paradigms that advocated top-down policy, this model is stressed on balanced distribution of economic gain, so that the poorer section of the society does not suffer, right? So now distribution focus is on distribution of economic gain, not only economic gain, but distribution of economic gain, so that I mean lower section of the society does not suffer, and they must be able to fulfill at least their minimum needs. Right. This multi-dimensional approach of development is society specific and is based on communication support system. Right. Priority should be given to the villagers and urban poor in the development program. So you will find that whole this approach, there is a single approach, it is multi-dimensional approach, right? It has taken, it talks about modern values also, it talks about traditional value also, it talks about, I mean, cultural values also. Having a communication infrastructure also. It talks about mass media. It talks about individual, interpersonal communication also. So you will find that it talks about other goals also, not only economic growth, but other factors, education, health, ecological balance. So you will find that this is a kind of multi-dimensional approach, right? And obviously focus is on poor section of the society, as it was. So this model is specifically emphasized on aspects like self-development and self-reliance. These two terms is very important, that this model specifically talks about these two terms. What is self-development? Self-development means that making the people in the transformation of social structure. In this approach, rate of accomplishment is higher, and it is considered most appropriate for changing local needs. It means self-development means that making people as a part of transformation, right? And if you make people as a part of this transformation, then certainly the rate of accomplishment will be higher, because they are taking part in the overall transformation. and it is considered most appropriate for local needs because they will be taking part, so they will be very much knowing their local needs, and because they know their local needs though, so they will take part to, I mean, fulfill those needs, right? So this is the first, I mean, self-development is focus of this paradigm. And second one is self-reliance. Self-reliance means emphasis was given to potential local resources and rejection of the foreign aid. It means that you should be self-reliant. I mean, whatever you have, so local resources became important, and your development goals should be based on your local resources, not no, should be based on the resources provided by foreign countries, right? So it is idea rejecting foreign aid and I mean achieving development goal through local resources. It is totally different from dominant paradigm. Dominant paradigm talks about foreign aid, right, and rejecting local resources, local ideas. But here it talks about adopting local resources and rejection of foreign aid. One another important aspect of this paradigm is that this alternative model of development also deals with construction of communication effect gap. Right. I mean, earlier, I mean, we understood that this always talked about that there is a lack of innovation among people. So that's why innovative idea should come from Western countries, and those ideas should be promoted through communication channels. This was the idea. But in this alternative paradigm, it was believed that it is not innovation, but basically it is a information and knowledge gap which is more important to deal with, right? And that's why this model noted that there exists an information and knowledge gap between the haves and have not, and as scholars are of the opinion that the communication effects gap can severely influence the course of development, right? It is not innovation, it is a lack of information, it is a lack of knowledge. So here communication become more important than the innovation, right? So this is the another important aspect of this theory. So now goals of alternative paradigm. First one is that full participation of people at all level. Second is balanced distribution of development benefits, integration of traditional ideas into modern system, and self-reliance of local communities, right? These are the goals that you have to ensure full participation of people. Second, benefits should be distributed among all the section of the society. Integration of traditional ideas in modern system, right? You have not to reject traditional ideas. You have to integrate traditional ideas in modern value system, and you have to make local communities self-reliant, right? So these are the goals of alternative paradigm. So now, role of communication. It advocates the two-way communication approach between people and the policymakers with special emphasis on to feedback, right? So now it is not one-way top-down communication. It is two-way communication where policymakers and people will interact with each other. They will mutually share their ideas, and then they will come to mutual understanding. And policymakers will take feedback from the people also, so that they may work upon that, and they may change their overall communication strategy, right? So this is two-way communication process. It is not one way that only, I mean, information will come from upper level and that will lead to downwards. So communication strategy used in this model is mainly interpersonal communication along with the mass media. So as in basic need model also we discussed it, that focus was on interpersonal communication and mass media both. So here again you will find that yes, focus is on both the communication, interpersonal communication channel and mass media also. Mass media was employed for reaching out to the remotest villages, right? It means that, I mean, mass media has greater reach. It is I mean, well known fact. So as mass media has greater reach, so it will reach out to the majority of the population. And interpersonal communication was used to construct a common identity comprising shared experiences and values. So why interpersonal communication? interpersonal communication, because interpersonal communication will be done by local population only, right? So local population have their shared experience, whatever experience, the problems or the solution or the need, the requirement, they have shared experiences and values, so it will be more effective, right? So both the channels are adopted. This model also supported the fact that the participatory approach and mutual exchange of views reduces the distance between public and authorities, right? So more you exchange your or share your idea, more the gap will be lesser. So that's why participation is a key in this model. Rogers 1976, think about the person who talked about diffusion information theory. He also changed his stance, and he started stating that participation of masses and the problem solving attitude of the authorities are the two elements added by Rogers in the diffusion approach. Now, in diffusion approach also, Rogers did two things, right? First is that, problem solving attitude of the authorities. This is first one, right? And no, second, first is participation of masses. Even participation is important, and second is problem solving attitude of the authorities. Both things are important. If I think about diffusion of information theory, diffusion of information theory never talked about all these things. That even these things matter when you try to diffuse a thing in a society, diffuse an idea in a society, right? So suppose your idea is good, but people are not participating. Suppose your idea is good, but authorities are not do not have problem solving attitude. So these two factors are important, and that's why Rogers adopted these two elements in his diffusion approach also. So according to him, communication was more important than the innovation. Now think, in diffusion efficient theory, the person who coined this theory, now he is saying that no, communication is more important than innovation, right? So you have to fill the gap of this communication and knowledge gap, right? Local organizations for development experts opine that external sources can never completely influence the development of any community unless it mobilizes the masses and initiate the process of autonomous development. So while critiquing the development paradigm of development, one pertinent question arises, that is how the poor and marginalized people could make the system and authorities accountable to them, right? So now people have started saying that in even other dominant paradigm, local organizations were not given more importance, right? So now when it was believed that no, mobilization of people, participation of masses is important, then local organization became important. So that's why this is the important question, that how to make people demand. Basically in model also we discussed that is poor people fear in making demand. So we have to promote a kind of unity among them. We have to organize them as a unit, and then only they will be able to make demand. And that's why this was the question, that how to make authorities accountable to them. So Rowling, he was a scholar in 1982, assumed that changing power system in the social structure can increase the countervailing power of the masses. So power structure will have to be changed, and there are several examples. Take example of non-aligned movement. Non-aligned movement after Second World War, right? When there were two groups, one was of United States of America, one group belonged to the USSR, and India, Indonesia, and several other countries, newly independent countries, decided that they will not be part of any of the group, right? So what it suggested, this new non-aligned movement demanded for a new world information and communication order and decreasing control of world economy. So why this third front emerged, and this third front challenged both the two poles of this world. One was controlled by USSR and another was controlled by USA. So it started demanding of new world order, new kind of communication structure, new kind of economic system, where they will have also a say in the whole process. Writing of Mahatma Gandhi, Paulo Freire, these were the people who tried to motivate people to make themselves reliant. Right? We can see the whole life of Mahatma Gandhi. Because Mahatma Gandhi always asked people to be self-reliant. When he found that people are very much dependent on foreign clothes, clothes made from machines, started talking about that make your own clothes, right? And charkha became one of the symbol of national movement, right? So the self-reliance, these people always talked about self-reliance, and these are certain examples. So how will you be able to change the power system? You will have to change the overall uh, social structure, right? And then only you will be uh, able to countervail the power of the masses. So now concluding remark is that alternative paradigm considered development as a holistic approach, as it included cultural, social, indigenous, and economic elements. So it is a holistic development of human being, holistic development of a society. It is not only about economic growth, it talks about holistic development. The alternative development attempts to integrate advantageously a number of diverse ideas of development that has emerged in the past few decades. So it is not only a single model. That's why we talk about alternative paradigm. It is not only about a single theory or single model. It tries to, take ideas from various development model, various development theory, and why they want to integrate all this theory to take advantage from those theories, right? It includes people's participation, integrated grassroots and rural development approaches, productive use of natural resources, technological uses, fulfillment of people's basic needs, preservation of environment, etc. So it has included everything which is required for a holistic development of a population. So alternative approach encouraged people to convey their experiences and values, opening up scopes. So that's why we talk of mutual sharing, participation. So through a sharing of their experiences and values, obviously it will increase the scope of participatory communication. And if participation will increase, obviously it will have advantages. It will have certain advantages. Concerns for indigenous cultural and grassroots organizations were also dealt in the alternative paradigms of development. So in dominant paradigm, there were certain concerns of indigenous culture and grassroots organizations. They used to criticize dominant paradigm because it is anti-cultural. It will vanish the overall indigenous culture and our social norms. So this alternative paradigm take care of these things also. That's why it includes cultural thing also, that if you bring in if some traditional values which are good, we need not to leave those values. Culturally you should try to promote the developmental ideas. So all those concerns were also dealt properly in this model. So this is what this alternative model says. Now if you have any question, you can ask. Thank you.
Said this theory came in 1980. Then why we discussed about Mahatma Gandhi?
Mahatma Gandhi, we discussed Mahatma Gandhi just as an example. If some theory come in 1980, does not mean that the thing which is being said in 1980 has not been said earlier, right? So Mahatma Gandhi was also used to support self-reliance, right? Atmanirbharta की तो बात ही करते थे वो. And he always talked about self-reliance, and that's why when this theory came in, we started figuring out those people who talked about it earlier. So Mahatma Gandhi was the even non-alignment movement also started after Second World War, well before 1980. So these are certain examples that how the, I mean, if you change the overall power structure, then it will have effect on overall social structure also. And if you want masses, how to make people, I mean, policymakers accountable to the people, how will you make them accountable? So these were certain examples that how non-aligned movement challenged the existing system, and it tried to make overall world system accountable towards third world countries who are newly independent and who want development only, who don't want to be part of these rivalry between USSR and USA, right? So these are certain examples. Even now we will find that the whole democratization, people in democracy, and even now in our country, we always say that our whole system is not accountable to the people. That's why we don't have good roads, we don't have good infrastructure, right? So how to make them accountable? This is the question. So you will be able to make them accountable through certain change in overall structure. So you can make local organization, you can make some groups who can start demanding about the local developmental concerns. So this is the way you will make policymakers accountable. So in while discussing this, Mahatma Gandhi came as an example.
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Yes, I mean, in this approach, social factors has, this is very good question. So both is asking, must be seeing in chat box that when we talk about cultural thing, right, you have to, when we say that there are certain value system, traditional value system, which are good for society. We will have to use our cultural norms to motivate people to adopt certain ideas. So this is always a concern that when we talk about traditional setup, when we talk about traditional idea, then these are traditional things, that casteism, patriarchal society, religious differences, all these are also part of our traditional settings, traditional system. And this is always a concern that we might start using these things also for some particular goal, and you may term that as development, right? So this is a concern, that how to I mean, understand that no, these casteism, gender bias, religion, all these things are not good value system, these are bad value system. And we will have to come out of all these things. But certainly when you theoretically, when you say that yes, you have to we have not to reject our traditional value system, then certainly there may be some groups who may start propagating that no, casteism is good thing, who may start propagating that no, patriarchal system is good thing. That's why we will find several people who talks about that no, women should not go out, women should not work outside, they should take care of household. And these are certain concerns. You are right, Subodh.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.